10 Forgotten Pulp magazine superheroes of Golden Age who deserve authentic live-action adaptations. Superhero movies have become the new favorite of producers and directors alike, but how often do we see new superheroes making their way onto the big screen? Most of us are only accustomed to the famous DC and Marvel superheroes, but what about the ones who were the influence and inspiration behind Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, etc.? While Batman and Superman made their first appearances in 1938 and 1939, there were already many pioneering and classic characters walking the comic strips of pulp magazines and newspapers. The Phantom, Zorro, and Flash Gordon are only a few among many such forerunners of modern superheroes.
Flash Gordon to Voltown.
The pulp magazines played a crucial role in popularizing these characters, but they got lost in the memories of viewers over the period of time. Ultimately, the growing unpopularity led to decline in quality live-action films. Marvelous Videos thought it was only apt to honor and remember the marvels of the superhero world, the ones who paved the way for the industry to become what it is today. In this video, we will reintroduce you to 10 of the greatest yet forgotten superheroes that were made in and around the golden age of comic books, 1938 to 1956.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
The Phantom. The Phantom is not someone with superhuman powers or abilities. He's just an ordinary guy who fights crime and criminals with his wits and fists. However, he excels in several forms of martial arts, has a pair of .45 caliber pistols, can speak fluently in many languages, and from the frame of reference of an ordinary man, is in the best possible shape with great strength, speed, and stamina. The Phantom dresses in a purple skin-tied outfit, but the earlier editions were mostly in black and white, or other colors like blue because, back then, printing the purple color was expensive and unviable. According to his legend, a 20-year-old guy named Christopher Walker was on a voyage with his father in 1536. Pirates then attacked the ship, and Christopher was the only survivor. He washed ashore almost dead and was given refuge by a pygmy tribe. Later, he finds the skull of the pirate leader who had killed his father, and swore by this skull that he'd dedicate his life to fighting injustice and crime, and that his children and their children shall follow his path. So, the Phantom is a mantle and not one particular person. There have been 22 Phantoms up until now, and this gives the perception that he's a man who never dies.
Great going, fam. Lead him into my range.
However, there have been female Phantoms as well. Even before Superman graced the world of comics, there existed many superheroes who featured in newspaper comics. One of the first to do so was the Phantom, and he goes by different names like the Man Who Never Dies or the Ghost Who Walks. Lee Falk created the Phantom, and the inspiration behind him came from various mythological and historical legends like King Arthur, Robin Hood, Tarzan, and Zorro. He was a pioneer in the world of superheroes, with features like white eyes behind his mask and wearing underpants above his pants. Although his first appearance came in a daily strip of early 1936, he has been published by all major comic publication houses like DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse. In 1996, Billy Zane starred in a live-action adaptation named The Phantom. The only saving grace was Zane, as everyone from the director to the writers is to be blamed for the film's poor performance. Phantom is a character whose backstory, powers, and personality seems to be the inspiration behind many famous superheroes, and definitely deserves a film that justifies his stature.
You committed murder, Duke. Now you're going to confess to it.
Like hell I will.
The Shadow. The Shadow is a very peculiar character who is a master of disguise, among other things. His real name is Kent Allard, and he used to be a remarkable Air Force pilot during World War I. By a happy mistake, he crash-landed in the jungles of South America, where he found a city of gold and made a fortune for himself. However, he faked his death and came to New York, and from that moment, he adopted the identities of other men. The most significant of those identities was a man named Lamont Cranston. He uses this disguise to fight crime in and around New York and takes help from several sidekicks. Furthermore, he has the hypnotic ability to make himself completely invisible to other people by altering their thoughts and perceptions. He's a skilled marksman and martial artist with the most advanced physique and physical strength.
next time you get to be on top.
Apart from using his mind and body for hunting criminals, he utilizes a pistol and a Thompson .45 caliber submachine gun. The first appearance of the Shadow is as mysterious as the character himself. On July 31st, 1930, a discreet narrator of a radio program called Detective Story Hour introduced himself as the Shadow in a sinister voice. As the character gained popularity, a publication named Street and Smith hired Walter B. Gibson to create a character that matched the narrator's name and voice. The Shadow made his first print appearance on April 1st, 1931, in a pulp novel named The Living Shadow. By 1937, he was adapted into a feature film called The Shadow Strikes. In total, there are 6 films based on this superhero, with the latest one featuring Alec Baldwin. However, none of these films failed to make the Shadow a popular superhero. The film received largely negative reviews from critics and fans alike. However, he was a classic superhero who was popular in the 30s through the 90s. DC Comics published the Shadow comics from 1975 to 1992, after which Dark Horse took over, even introducing a crossover between the Shadow and Doc Savage in 1995. Without a doubt, while creating Batman, Bob Kane and Bill Finger were inspired by the rich man who was a master of stealth and disguise. The Shadow has further left his shadow in Disney's Darkwing Duck and Warner Brothers' V from V for Vendetta.
Flash!
Stop them!
Flash Gordon. When a catastrophic collision threatens Earth with the planet of Mongo, Dr. Hans Zarkov invents a spaceship to go to Mongo and remove the threat. He forces Flash Gordon and his love interest Dale Arden to come aboard the spacecraft to Mongo, and the trio fights its evil ruler Ming the Merciless. Flash, Dale, and Dr. Hans become a part of many adventures with different kingdoms of Mongo.
Flash!
Stay back!
Don't Flash, they'll kill you!
As for Flash Gordon, he doesn't possess any superpowers, but he is a man of great valor and dedication who performs superheroic tasks. As he used to be a professional athlete on Earth, he is very agile and strong with good stamina. He is also an efficient leader who combines his intellect with combat skills like marksmanship and swordsmanship. Life at Mongo turned him into an expert of unarmed combat and weapons. And though his adventures brought him to Earth in many comic issues, he's essentially a resistance fighter of space. In later versions, he also became an astronaut and traveled to planets other than Mongo. Back in the day, Buck Rogers was doing great commercially, and King Features Syndicate was motivated to have a character of similar lines. They hired Alex Raymond to create the character, and Flash Gordon made his first appearance in January 1934 as a comic strip. Raymond's primary inspiration for Flash Gordon came from Philip Wiley's 1933 novel When Worlds Collide.
We're from Earth. Friends.
In this novel, an athletic young man travels with his girlfriend and a scientist to another planet. As soon as the comic hit the stands, they became an instant sensation. If we're to use 21st century vocabulary, they went viral. Historians and researchers of sci-fi art considered Raymond's Flash Gordon to be one of the most detailed characters, and the setting of Mongo is the result of profoundly vast imaginations. He has been depicted in almost all media forms, from magazines and comics to animated shows and live-action shows. By the way, do you remember the scene from Avengers Infinity War when Iron Man mockingly refers to Star-Lord as Flash Gordon?
Don't encourage this, all right? We're getting no help from Flash Gordon here.
Flash Gordon, by the way, that's a compliment.
The most famous live-action film remains the one from 1980, directed by Mike Hodges. Flash Gordon used to be a pop culture icon, but the tides of time have worn down his popularity, and he remains largely forgotten. However, there are possibilities of a new Flash Gordon live-action film that could release in the next 2 or 3 years. El Zorro. Don Diego de la Vega was studying in Spain, where he learned swordsmanship, but was called back to California when the state fell into an oppressive dictator's hands. Once he was back, he saw the plight of the oppressed who lived at the mercy of corrupt and violent officials. Moved by the atrocities faced by the poor locals, he assumed the alter ego of a masked vigilante who fought the oppressors and helped the oppressed in every way he could. In his quest, he remains very cunning and charming, often mocking the officials. He had a bounty on his head, but the bumbling officers could never catch the skilled acrobat. This led the locals to call him El Zorro, which is fox in Spanish. Since Zorro's story was based in the 18th century, he uses weapons like a throwing knife, a bullwhip for grappling, as well as a pistol. His most frequently used weapon, however, remains his rapier, which is a sharply pointed double-edged sword. This dashing masked vigilante who dons a black cape and hat was created in 1919 by Johnston McCulley in his novel The Curse of Capistrano. The novel was supposed to be a standalone work of fiction, but when a 1920 film called The Mask of Zorro gained unexpected and unconventional popularity, Johnston wrote 5 serialized stories and 57 short stories. However, most of his stories didn't see the light of day until the 21st century. Disney released a television series named Zorro in 1957, while he appeared in many Disney comics, including 4 stories in their monthly issue named Walt Disney's Comics and Stories. The character remained dormant for quite some time until 1990, when Marvel Comics published him once again. Zorro has existed for more than 100 years now, and has had the luxury of featuring in more than 40 films and in 10 TV shows. The most famous ones remain the 1998 film The Mask of Zorro and its 2005 sequel, The Legend of Zorro. He's a pop culture icon, depicted via toy lines, video games, and even RPGs. Interestingly, Douglas Frey released an erotic parody of Zorro in 1972 called The Erotic Adventures of Zorro. Having said that, this caped and masked vigilante became the source and inspiration of many future superheroes with dual identities like Batman, Green Lantern, and Superman.
Don Diego is returning home.
Land in sight!
In the latest news, a game called Zorro the Chronicles for the PS4 and PS5 has been announced.
Save your strength, old friend. This is Mongo Ice.
How can we free ourselves?
Observe.
Mandrake the Magician. Long before Batman brewed fear into the hearts of criminals or the mighty Captain America waged battles upon the bad guys, there existed a handsome and stylish superhero who fought crime with a name that suited his style. Mandrake the Magician is a tall and thin man who sported a fine, slick mustache, a black hat, a scarlet cape, and of course, a magician's wand. This name comes from a plant called mandragora, which contains a strong hallucinogenic alkaloid. Naturally, Mandrake the Magician's powers remain grounded in hypnosis and the illusion of his enemies. But he also has other abilities like levitation, shape-shifting, teleportation, and invisibility.
Fear not, my boy. The best way to fight illusion is with illusion.
Here we have our perfect superhero with a horde of staple superhuman abilities and powers. His love interest was an exotic princess called Narda, but she was not just a damsel. She helped him fight various enemies. They both battled against extraterrestrials, supernatural beings, and criminals. But their archenemy was an evil man in a silver mask called the Cobra.
Well, perhaps I should arrange a little welcome home party.
Mandrake the Magician was created along with the Phantom and made his first appearance in the summer of 1934 as a comic strip. He became an instant sensation among readers, and to this day, we have more than 200 publications based on him. Back in the early 30s, when Mandrake was created, the idea of a comic protagonist was in the reflection of a muscular man who was strong as steel and huge as a Hulk. Yet, the stylish and slick character ushered in a new era with his wit and well-versed vocabulary.
It seems to be a waste of time, and we have precious little time to waste.
Another shift from the conventional style of comic storytelling was the villains in Mandrake's world. They were almost always members of his own family, or a darker reflection of himself. Many historians consider him to be the first ever superhero in the truest sense of the term. Mandrake appeared in many Dell comic publications and also in Marvel Comics miniseries written by Mike W. Barr. In 2016, it was announced by Warner Brothers that they were in the process of developing a Mandrake the Magician film, with Sacha Baron Cohen as the titular character. However, their recent preoccupation with DCEU seems to act as a barrier. Irrespective of when the film comes out, we will all be thrilled to see this Depression-era, dread-inducing, and wand-wielding debonair grace the cinemas.
When you're in that kind of trouble, who do you call on?
Doc Savage! Doc Savage! Doc Savage! Doc Savage!
Doc Savage. The father of Clark Savage assembled a team of scientists to train Savage's mind and body to make him the most competent man alive. The final result was Doc Savage with nearly superhuman abilities. From programming a computer and designing a weapon to playing piano and planning an invasion, there's nothing that Doc Savage can't do. To give you the perfect picture of his powers, we'd ask you to imagine a man who has Sherlock Holmes' mental abilities, Tarzan's strength, Bruce Banner's scientific knowledge, and Captain America's righteousness and goodness. Well, suppose you have successfully imagined such a man. In that case, he is almost as skillful as Savage. But not entirely, because Savage is also a physician, scientist, detective, explorer, and researcher. Furthermore, he has a photographic memory, efficiency in martial arts, and is a master of mimicry and disguise. Savage is also a rich man whose office is on the 86th floor of a skyscraper and owns fleets of luxurious cars, trucks, aircrafts, and ships. If you thought it was over, then wait. He also has a retreat in the Arctic where he goes to think, and it's called his Fortress of Solitude. If you recall, Superman also has one such refuge of the same name. Doc Savage was created at Street and Smith Publications by publisher Henry W. Ralston and editor John L. Nanovic, but the main contributor was Lester Dent. The legacy of Savage is such that the great Stan Lee considered him to be the forerunner of modern superheroes. And why not? This character was filled with abilities, skills, and powers, all of which he used to fight bad guys and bring them to justice. Having been created in what can only be called the golden age of superheroes and comics, he was the epitome of all the things any person would want. The first publication came out in March of 1933, and since then there have been hundreds of publications based on him. In 1975, director and producer George Pal made Doc Savage the Man of Bronze, with Ron Ely in the titular role. In 1999, Arnold Schwarzenegger was supposed to play the polymath, but the project was shelved when Arnold became the governor of California. However, hopes are still high when the news that Dwayne Johnson would play Doc Savage in a television show, which was initially meant to be a live-action film. The show and Dwayne's character would be publicized as the world's first superhero.
Rogers, I ordered you to stay out of this.
Girl, you need all the help you can get.
Go home.
Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers was born in the late 1800s and participated in the First World War upon growing up. However, after the end of the war, he joined the American Radioactive Gas Corporation. In 1927, he was sent on an investigative mission to Pennsylvania, where a mine was covered with pungent gas. Upon reaching the mine, it unfortunately caved in. But Rogers didn't die.
Captain William Buck Rogers are blown out of their trajectory into an orbit which freezes his life supports.
Instead, the gas threw him into a state of a coma, but his physical and mental state were left untouched, and his body neither deteriorated, nor did it need food or water. Rogers woke up after almost 500 years in 2419 AD, where America was in the midst of another world war.
And returns Buck Rogers to Earth 500 years later.
What follows are Rogers' adventures in this strange new era. Philip Francis Nolan created Buck Rogers, and the character was first featured in 1928 in a pulp magazine called Amazing Stories. Buck Rogers' adventures became so popular and economically viable that other publication houses wanted to own the rights of Rogers, or at least have their own characters on the same lines. One of the direct consequences of this race was Flash Gordon. Naturally, Rogers made his way into comic strips, movies, radio, and television, and became a part of America's pop culture. The revolution of space exploration that pioneering writers like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells started was brought into the larger public domain by Buck Rogers and the subsequent characters. Although he was adapted in a television series back in 1950, Roger never got the cinematization he deserved. In 1979, NBC released another television series named Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, and its pilot was in the form of a film. But folks, we come bearing good news. In all probability, George Clooney might explore the space and adventures of Rogers in a reboot of the 1979 television series. Also, Legendary Entertainment is in the final phases of finalizing a live-action film adaptation of Rogers. John Carter of Mars. John Carter was a firefighter for the Confederacy of the United States of America during the Civil War. To hide from the Apaches, he took shelter in a cave and seemed to be dying, but his astral self was somehow transported to Mars while his physical body remained on Earth. On Mars, however, he was alive in another body and was seemingly stronger and more agile because he was accustomed to the stronger gravitational pull of Earth. On Mars, he saves a princess named Dejah Thoris of Helium, and the two fall in love. He indulges in several Martian adventures and fights the aliens and humanoids of all kinds, until he sacrifices himself to save Mars from a catastrophic event. But he's magically transported back to the cave where he had first died. Later, John Carter masters the art of astral travel between Earth and Mars. John Carter first appeared around 110 years ago in Edgar Rice Burroughs' 1912 fantasy novel, A Princess of Mars. This 6 foot 2 inches, nearly immortal man later appeared in 1952 in 3 issues of Dell Comics under the name John Carter of Mars. A 1996 4-issue Dark Horse Comics named Tarzan/John Carter, Warlords of Mars merged the 2 characters, and the miniseries was widely praised. Much like the other superheroes on this list, John Carter did not enjoy the luxury of being well depicted in live-action films or even television shows. Despite being a famous pop culture icon of North America and having a backstory and setting worthy of being turned into a franchise, the appreciation for Edgar Burroughs' work is long overdue.
On your feet. Go!
Kull of Atlantis. He was born in 100,000 BC in Atlantis before it was submerged into the sea. At that time, it was ruled by barbarians, and Kull grew up among them into a fine soldier. However, as his family and tribe were wiped out by the flood, he roamed around as a feral child only to be enslaved by other groups. Later, he gained his freedom and moved towards Thuria and joined the army of Valusians as a mercenary. However, he led a revolt against the king of Valusia named Borna and became king himself. The adventures of Kull show that he's a man of exceptional power, stamina, and strength. He's a big, muscular figure who excels in various art forms and is a great tactician in war. Kull fights humans from other parts of his ancient world, as well as supernatural entities and creatures from the unknown. He's a slave, pirate, outlaw, gladiator, and also a king who knows that gaining kingship is easier than securing it.
Salgar, Your Majesty.
You wish to go home? Well, do so now. You're free.
Help!
Robert E. Howard created Kull, and he first appeared in the Shadow Kingdom of the pulp magazine Weird Tales. Despite having been created before Conan the Conqueror, Kull did not garner as much cinematic approval or appreciation as Conan did. Interestingly, the first Conan story was actually a rewrite of a rejected Kull story. On the one hand, where Conan was more likely to commit immoral things like theft and visiting brothels, Kull's character was more introspective and thoughtfully created. Between 1971 and 1985, Kull appeared in exclusive Marvel comic publications, in addition to appearing in various Conan comics like The Savage Sword of Conan. However, in 2006, Dark Horse secured the publishing rights of Kull. In 1997, Kevin Sorbo starred as Kull the Conqueror and remains the only notable adaptation of this great warrior king. Kull was a famous figure during the second quarter of the 20th century, but his fellowship gradually disappeared, and so did the will of the producers and directors to depict him in a film. However, we think Kull deserves as much acknowledgement as Conan, if not more.
God, you've done it!
Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. Cardwell Rivington was traveling in the jungles of Africa with his young blonde daughter Sheena. They came into contact with a witch doctor named Koba. Mr. Rivington accidentally drinks a potion created by Koba and he passes away, leaving Sheena an orphan. Koba raises Sheena as his own daughter and teaches her the tricks and trades of the jungle. She soon acquires the ability to talk to all kinds of animals, in addition to learning the primary African languages of the period.
I am Sheena.
She fights slave traders, colonists, and hostile natives and animals. Some of her enemies are humanoid lions and apes, while others are as small as a colony of killer ants. Sheena excels in using various weapons and is trained in the Native American martial arts.
You remain here to be sure he obeys me. Get out!
The adventures of Sheena blend the worlds of National Geographic or Discovery Channel with the world of superheroes, and we only wish we could have more of her. Sheena, Queen of the Jungle was created by Fiction House and first appeared in 1938. She has the luxury of being the first female comic book character with her own title, as she precedes WonderWoman #1 by 3 years, which was published in 1941. This ravishing and attractive forest superheroine was played by Tanya Roberts in the 1984 Columbia Pictures film named Sheena, and by model Irish McCalla in a 26-episode show called Sheena, Queen of the Jungle.
Bob make roar like lion, but have good heart.
After the 1984 film, Marvel Comics published her in a special issue titled Marvel Comics Super Special No. 34. Despite being cinematized in a few shows and films, no one has ever explored the vast opportunities that this character possesses. Since she blends the intriguing world of wildlife with elements of femme fatale, she becomes a terrifyingly potential superhero. After all, Black Panther sells, why won't Sheena?
And if you liked our content, Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.